Okay, good morning everyone. We are beginning the plenary session of the third day of this conference. My name is Ron Kennett. I'm Chairman and CEO of KPA, the KPA Group. I'm a professor at the University of Turin, and my claim to fame is that I'm one of the four founders of Babylon, which many people are using worldwide. This panel will have four participants. One is an early stage investor. The second one is the chief scientist of the Ministry of Science and Technology. The third one is a professor at the Technion. And the fourth one actually lives in Beijing, and we are very lucky to have him here. He is the founding and managing partner of the Infinity Group. So we have four different views. We are going to talk about innovation. That's the topic of this conference. And following a presentation by each of the participants, we're going to try and have some kind of discussion, a roundtable discussion, which is completely unplanned. Okay, so the first speaker is Eden Shochat. He's a general partner of Genesis, a seed stage investing VC, which is very active. He has 15 years of experience in high tech. He's the founder and the CTO of a variety of software companies. He's also an angel investor and has this entrepreneurship disease in his blood, I guess, from the record here. And I actually don't know what he's going to talk about. So
I think those are the most fun talks, right? The one that you have no idea what to expect. Let's see if this works. Okay. So good morning to all. My background you already heard. I think the primary thing for me in life is building stuff. That's what I've done since I was, I guess, 8 in Nigeria. And ever since, building companies has been both a disease as well as the thing I wake up for. So what I'm going to talk about today is one very specific thing, is unstructured innovation or organized chaos, or whatever you call it. And I'll talk through one experiment. Really is an experiment at this stage called The Junction. It's a place where entrepreneurs come in, and we're hoping that as they go out, we actually give them both the tools as well as the advancement in order to build the new age, the next generation of companies in Israel. And in many ways, it has not been tested before as a model. And I'll talk why and our primary takeaways to date about that. So you already heard what I do, my day job, I think is the best day job in the world. I get to invest in the best and brightest in Israel. That's what I do every day. I meet between 3 to 5 companies. The statistics of venture capital are such that you meet 500 companies, but you actually invest in 2, 3, 4, maybe a year. So in many ways, you're trying to find a way to help that community outside of just giving them the money. And that's the topic for today, the story of The Junction. It's a place in South Tel Aviv. And the whole thing started with a place called Dogpatch. Dogpatch is a beautiful place in San Francisco, just on the pier. It actually is going to move from the pier because supposedly that place is no longer safe. But it has been nice. It's a shared workspace. It's about this size, the room that you're sitting in, and it's a place for entrepreneurs to sit, $500 a month, and just get a table. So it all started with a visit in December 2011 that was in that location. But this is either true or a joke. I believe this is a joke. So Israelis in general are looking for ways to improve on stuff. So the first translation of Shakespeare would have the writing in the back for an Israeli, translated and improved by, right? So you always look for how can you take it to the next level. And for us, it could not have been a shared workspace. That's kind of boring. Though people generally, when they start a company, they either sit in a coffee shop or in their living room until they get kicked out of that living room, and they try to build stuff, right? That's the innovation. But just sitting in a specific location, what's the benefit of that? That was the question that we asked for 2 months before we opened the place. It took 2 months to open, by the way, because I'm an engineer. That's my background. I'm used to dealing with memory leaks, right? That's the leaks I know. We actually had a water leak in the location. It took us 2 months to solve, and that gave us a lot of time to think what it is that we're trying to do. If you take entrepreneurship in Israel, what it is that you're trying to solve, because supposedly we have 2,000 companies created every year, so what's the problem, right? The big problem was, how do you start companies? How do you make sure that those ideas that people sit in their living room at Friday night, and how do you take it to the next level? So the first thing that we decided is no filtering by idea. And why is that? When the idea is so nascent, when it's so early stage, it would change. Two things. It would change. And the second thing is no one has the tool set to predict really the future. Whether it's going to be successful or not. So when we look at the 300 or so applications that we get today for every wave, and I'll talk what a wave is, we don't ask them what their idea is. We do not know. What we do is we ask 3 things. Are you working full-time on your idea? Which is a proxy to, are you really an entrepreneur? Because they haven't raised capital at that point, right? So basically they're burning through their own money. So that's an entrepreneur. The second question we ask is, were you able to recruit a team, which is a proxy to, were you able to convince the wife or the husband of your partners that they'll be working without pay as well? And that's a good proxy to, will you be able to raise capital? Because if you were able to convince them, it's likely that you'll be able to convince a venture capitalist. And are you willing to work 90% on your idea? But 10% of the time, you'll be working on other people's ideas. You'll be helping out the other people that sit with you. So it's a 3-month program, and within those 3 months, you have 20 people sitting there, and that's about 10 different teams, and they all have very different qualifications. So are you willing to help out, or are you an asshole, right? So so by 300 people, we actually, by these 3 questions, we reduce it to less than 30, which is surprising, but is the reality. And the end result is that the signal-to-noise ratio, right? Investing or predicting the future is a signal-to-noise ratio problem, and the needle in the haystack. And by looking at just these 3 qualifications, you actually are trying to find the real entrepreneurs, and the ideas will change. Who cares? But you bring in the best 30 that are most likely to succeed. And what you do here is a paid-forward acceleration. And this is first time in the world, still a psychological experiment. We have no idea whether it will work, but I'll talk to the current data that we have around it. What does it mean paid forward? Is you are not asked to give anything in return. So you get all the resources that we can provide. Genesis, we manage $620 million. So we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of connections. We have had a lot of experiences, links, and you pay nothing. You don't give equity, and you don't give us any rights. And the interesting thing is, this creates a cognitive dissonance for the person that goes in, right? They're getting something and not giving something in return. So the paid forward, you need to help out the people that come after you in the next waves. So we're building a kind of a trust system or an obligation system for people to actually help out. And it has an interesting results. So the very basic value that you have is a place to sit. It's a small place. It's intentionally small place to get people to talk more. It's about the size of a quarter of this room. So intentionally small, but the table that you have, the chair that you have will not move. It's not overbooked. You're staying there. Your papers will stay there. As fast internet as possible and as much coffee as you can drink. 3 basic things of a shared workspace. That's no-brainer, right? But what happened really, that's how it started. But what happened really is, the first thing that you see here is, again, a small place, but people started asking, okay, so you have 20 people there, how can you provide more value to the community? And what you're seeing is 70 people, that's about the max of the place, where we open up every Thursday afternoon, and we give now the biggest entrepreneur community in Israel, the Junction community, we give them 2,500 people competing on 70 spots of the talks that happen. And the talks range from accessing Silicon Valley to Ruby on Rails to success stories of entrepreneurs, to failure stories of entrepreneurs, pretty much everything and everything, just for people to come in, and they're asked to give that information back in return to the community. So that happens every Thursdays. The next thing that happened, and again, we didn't predict this, is people really wanted to do something called office hours. Office hours is a way for people to help out other people. So UX, user experience people, CTOs, marketing people, people come in and say for Zionism reasons, so I have no idea whether it will work outside of Israel, though we have been approached both by Russia as well as Singapore and other countries in order to try and replicate this model. I have no idea whether this is going to work outside of Israel, but these people come in once a month and for 4 or 5 hours and help out the teams for nothing. They have no recognition. They don't. If you're a consultant, you will not get in, so it's not deal flow. And the only thing that you get in return is the feeling that you helped out other people. And what happens then is this creates more of a cognitive dissonance. So the teams that are in there now really want to help out the teams that come after them because they know that these people have given something without asking for anything in return. The other thing that happened is the guy that you see here is David Lowy, or his original name is David Lavib, but he was born in Iraq, and he's now the head of M&A for Google. That's one example, but the head of Project X of Google, the head of M&A of Facebook, the CTO of Autodesk, they have all made the place, the small place, the junction, as a place they must visit when they come to Israel. So we get inbound calls today of really high ups that say, hey, I've heard there is a place that really celebrates innovation in organized chaos fashion, and we really want to come in and talk with these guys. So that's the other thing that happened, and this is much more than a shared workspace. And what you see, this is wave one. Every group of people come in for a 3-month period. The way that we think it, we strap a missile up the whatever, and we try to push them as much as we can within those 3 months. So that's wave one. What they taught us is that the people inside the waves really want to collaborate. So you have people from the marketing, building logos, actually engineering for other teams. Remember, these people did not meet each other until that first time. The other thing that taught us is, this is part of Wave 3, they taught us that there is something called the Wave alumni community. People really care about you being a Junction member before. And if you think of it, what this generates is every wave that we go through is a power multiplier for the next waves. So these people that were in wave 1 now really want to help. Wave 2, same, again and again and again, and now we are 150 strong, and these people are doing some incredible stuff. So this is an example, a system that we just put in place for office hours. And what it means is that we have many people come in from the 150 that already graduated and other people that really want Israel to succeed. And this is a voting system, so you get 100 credits, just credits, and you need to divide them between the different office hours. So people actually go to the office hours that matter most for them. And up until that point, we had a system that says, hey, the first one to vote that I want to be with that office hour member, then they'll get it. But this has turned this into a much more efficient system. The other thing that we're seeing, and this is, you're seeing a lot of involvement by the Israeli entrepreneur community that give us ideas. This is a system called the Pulse, because it's a 3-month period, right? We kept losing a lot of the data, a lot of the knowledge that people had. So this is a knowledge management system that we have instituted. And what you see, this is an actual example of a person that thanks the Wave 7, they're now part of Wave 7, about the help that they gave in just getting their product more suitable to the market. So he got value from the people that sit with him. The other person is Ido Yablonka. Ido Yablonka, I think, is Wave 3. So this is 4 waves ago. This is 1 year ago. And still, he comes in every wave. He comes and does those 4 hours. But for him, it wasn't enough. As you can see, so Ido came in, gave the hour for the team, but then he said, no, I didn't give you enough value. We must meet again. We must meet again, and I'll help you more. And they met for 2-3 hours more. And Ido has a startup, actually a pretty successful startup called ClarityRay. And he finds a time and he actually pushes people that he needs to help them more. So that's kind of the cognitive dissonance that we're instituting between them. More than that, we've been asked every wave, why don't we force them to do social work or voluntary work or anything? And the answer to that is that will diminish your cognitive dissonance. We don't want to ask you for anything. You need to want to do it yourself. Another thing, Eitan Levit taught other people about something called the Lean Startup methodology. Google, who has access to that knowledge management system, saw him and said, hey, we must meet this guy. He's teaching people about internet technologies more than we are teaching other people. And so that's the pay-it-forward model, and that's the one thing that works very well. Every 3 months period ends with a demo day. Remember, I'm part of a VC. My job is to invest in companies. So the strangest thing that we have done here is that this is not deal flow. We actually give away the deal flow. We give away the companies after the 3 months period, and we let 30, 40 angels that we trust invest in those companies, without us having not the option or the obligation, not by us, not by them. So we actually give them an end date where they must have a demo. This is a demo day. This is not presentation day. It can be glued with a chewing gum. It can be held by strings. It doesn't matter. They have to show a demo. And like every project expands to whatever time is allocated to it, but it also contracts. So after 3 months, these people will show a demo. Which is incredible. Just think of building a product in 3 months. So we now have also companies that are in the community that we help out. So you don't necessarily need to be part of the junction. We also allow companies from outside to come and enjoy those presentations to 40. And 11 in 50 companies got funded, which means that we're X5 of the industry average, which is 1 in 25. So the program works. And this is a call to action. You can come and visit the junction. It's in Shotkan 32, Tel Aviv. And if you do need additional information, that's my contact info, and I'll love to help if you need.
On the first day of this conference, we heard Professor Ran Gazit talk about innovation not coming from universities. And our next speaker, Professor Gazit, is the chief scientist of the Ministry of Science and Technology. He was the chairman of Ramot. He has a background in academia, and I'm sure he's going to tell us why innovation should come from universities.
Thank you for the introduction. As was said, I'm coming from the academic world, but not only from basic science, but also from applied science. Not only in my role as professor, but also administrator. As was mentioned, I was chairman of Ramot, it's the tech transfer company of Tel Aviv University, and vice president for research and development. But wearing another hat, I'm quite involved in the development of intellectual properties. Personally, as an inventor, we have more than 30 patent families which were licensed to companies in Germany, the US, Israel. Coming from the startup nation, I don't have any startup company, so it's quite a contrast of what was presented here and part of the Israeli ethos. But I think that in order to maximize the potential of intellectual property generation in Israel, we need to consider several models, and one of them is the licensing of technology that was generated in Israel. Not only as a startup and then some kind of an exit strategy. Just to give you an illustration, this is not part of my presentation, but this is something that always strikes me. Israel is very advanced in the number of patents. Per capita, we are the first in the world. But in terms of royalty from patents, we are somewhere in the middle. Of course, since we are very innovative, we are in a reasonable place. But per capita in Israel, revenues from licensing is around $200 per capita. If you take Sweden, for example, in which you have less patents per capita, the income is more than 4 times, more than $800 per capita. And there are many advantages of licensing, and I will be happy to discuss it in a roundtable. So today I wasn't sure about the format also myself, so I will speak a little bit about innovation, the role of, from my point of view, the importance of advanced technological investment in those areas when you want high profit. Again, a little bit different than what used to be in Israel. I think that Israel now matured to have an advanced type of industry, and biotech and medical devices is one example. This is stating the obvious, but I'm old enough to remember working with old search agents. There were quite few back in the 90s. None of them was very successful. And when you have something of high technological but also scientific value, it's not, I think it's not a coincidence that this came from Stanford University and from the Department of Computer Science. I still remember the first time I used Google. After using all the different, and for me personally, for many reasons, it was important to search the net for some information that was not trivial to get. And it was the first time you could try to find something and really find it. And it was all about advanced understanding of mathematics and bringing a much better algorithm to a problem that was faced by many people. As for me, as it was already presented, let's see if here. I truly believe that the area in which we would like to be is this one, an advanced type of industry that is based on a highly developed research and development, have high relative profit per invested fund. And nowadays, many of the areas of industry in which Israel is playing some role in electronics, in types of IT that was in the past, in the previous century, in the 20th century, was quite advanced. Nowadays, the margin of profits are so small that we need to transform ourselves to those areas in which you have margins of profits of 20+%. And in the Ministry of Science and Technology, everybody knows the chief scientist of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Labor. We're trying to develop those earlier stages of the new waves of industrial development for the state of Israel. So it's not only investment in research and development, and this is also part of our role, also as defined by the Israeli law, not that it's always being kept, but we are in charge also on technological foresights in the terms of the National Council for Research and Development. We are related and involved in the training of new students, especially in those areas of technology, in the Eshkol fellowships. And if you look at all these lines, you need the investment in R&D, you need to have top-level experts in technology, you need a commercial know-how, and I think that Israel is becoming more and more successful in this area. And I think that it's also the cultural know-how. And this goes back, for me, if we look at another very trivial, and it sounds a bit like a cliche, but still, with the iPad, with the iPod, there were so many music players, there were so many different technological platforms, and really understanding the combination of the cultural need, the way to combine the product together with some hype, together with some social network, made such a difference. And another thing that, of course, is very important is the link between scientific papers and patents, and also the interdisciplinary nature of innovation. If you take green technology, for example, this is something that is of high interest, not only in Israel, but also in other countries. You see that you have the combination of different disciplines. And another thing, now speaking about the ministry, we are trying to foster and encourage interdisciplinary research. This is trivial for the Israelis here. I will skip it, and this is a little bit about the things that we do. I feel now comfortable because I was asked by someone in the audience about the Ministry of Science and Technology, so at least you will get some new information. So, again, this was intended for a larger international audience, but still I will do the Israeli pitch in 30 seconds. Israel is a leader in the number of scientific publications and also the number of citations, which is even more important. This is the criterion for the excellence of scientific publications. This is a very important figure in the number of scientists per capita. Israel is number one in the world, which is maybe also bases the competition on academic position in the Israeli university, but also our ability to generate such a large degree of innovation. Israel is investing quite a lot in R&D, more than many of our major European countries. From my point of view, there's more investment in D rather than R, and we see not always agree with the policy of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Labor, but I think that at least the fact that we invest so much in R&D contributes significantly to the advancement of science in Israel. And this is reflected also in our recognition by the scientific community. So if we look at the research structure in Israel, we have quite good basic science, as I mentioned, and you see it in the number of publications, the number of citations, Nobel Prizes, so on and so forth. We have quite an advanced investment in the industrial research and development. The Ministry of Trade Industry provides quite large and sometimes, in some cases, maybe not very competitive investment in early stage companies as well as more established companies. And we try to target this gray zone. In some cases, you have the VCs that are targeting this area, and we are trying to keep this, to bridge this gap between the academic world and industry. So if you look at the flow, at the value chain of research and development, everybody knows about this area in which you have VCs and later on other investment funds and more mature companies. Basic science is being funded by different mechanisms like the Israeli Science Foundation and others, and we are trying to find ourselves here, supporting early stages of science here in this applied science and strategic research, supporting the training of new personnel in the field of science and technology, helping the other ministries, Ministry of Industry, of course, but you have chief scientists in most executive ministries, like Ministry of Environmental Protection, Agriculture, Medicine, the Department of Health, so on and so forth. We have a chief scientist forum. There are 12 different chief scientists in the different executive offices, as I mentioned. And by law, we are responsible for executing the government-directed R&D in Israel, defining national priorities, coordinate research policies between different offices. If the government of Israel decided that it's a strategic goal for the state of Israel to invest in alternative sources of energy from transportation, we need to coordinate the efforts between the different government offices and shared infrastructures in different mechanisms. One of the mechanisms that we have is the National Council for Research and Development, which serves as an advisory board, and if I go to my third or fourth slide, is in charge of technological foresight. And we have some success story in bridging the gap between academic and commercial activities. This is one of the mechanisms that we have, less known by the general public because, as I mentioned, we support only academic institutes, research institutes, governmental R&D organization, and not the industry directly or startup companies, only if they are subcontractors of those bodies. We're in charge also of international scientific relations, and there are many countries in which we have active agreements for joint research. In some cases, I take Japan for example, due to many reasons, mainly, I have to be careful because I'm a part-time government official, but the fact is that we don't have an active industrial agreement with Japan due to some political reasons. But in terms of R&D, there's a demand, always a demand to increase the level of R&D with Japan. I think that Japan is a gateway to the Far East. Israeli know better other places in the Far East, but I think that Japan has its own economical problems, but a place in which technology and innovation and a methodic way to convert research into advanced product is there, and I think there's quite a lot for the collaboration between Israeli and Japanese scientists, and later on industrialists. We are dealing also with regional R&D centers, which the idea is to have research and development not only in the Tel Aviv, Rehovot, Jerusalem area, but try to bring it to different places. And there are some success stories in the Upper Galilee and also in the Dead Sea and in the Arava Desert. And I think it is also important. Zionism was also already mentioned by Eden. I think this is another direction is the Israeli space agencies. This is another area in which the ministry is very active. As you may know, Israel is a leader in the field of defense-related space abilities. Some of it is related to known and unknown activities of the Israeli Defense Forces. We try to convert it into also into civilian applications, and this is one of our roles. Just to finish by mentioning some of the companies that started as academic ideas, had grants for the Ministry of Science and Technology, and later on became more or less successful startup entities, and some of it were actually merged or being purchased or licensed to larger companies. Another example is in the field of nanotechnology. This is another company based on technology from the Weizmann Institute by Professor Reshef Tene, and once again starting by such a strategic research by the Ministry of Science and Technology, ended up with quite a successful company. So I was briefed as asked, and thank you for your attention, and I will be very happy to discuss later on around the round table.
Our next speaker is Professor Menachem Weiss from the Technion. He's Professor of Mechanical Engineering. He has a prestigious career in Rafael. We talked about ISA and missiles, and he's one of the few who earned the National Defense Award, and this is, I learned from Eden, a very good predictor for successful startups. Professor Weiss is going to talk to us about how to design a new and innovative product methodologically with a question mark. So there's a positive answer or negative answer?
Thank you. How does it work? No. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to speak about how to design new and innovative products methodically. Mr. Shochat spoke about unstructured innovation. Just the contrary, I'm going to speak about structured innovation. And I claim that more than 90%, maybe much more, of new innovative product systems, etc., can be built using our regular knowledge and all what that we know. Only very few need really a breakthrough. There is a common, people expect that innovation is some kind of magic. Only an inventor can come up with a new idea or some new product, etc. It's wrong. I think everybody can. And all everybody has to do is to go according to a certain way or rule. How it will succeed? Sorry. To succeed on the market, a new product has to satisfy a real need, and we'll speak about a real need. It has to satisfy the customer's emotions. That's very modern. It has to be economic and to be good and reliable. It means it has to have good engineering. For all that, we need a new concept for something. And we claim that the concept of a new product can be really designed methodically, not just out of the blue to come out with an idea. From the definition of a new need, and again I will speak about that, till the best concept has been generated, selected, etc. But as we always know, this is only a local optimization. By that I mean, whatever we do and whatever successful product we have, always can happen that the following day somebody comes with a better idea. There is no total. The integrated customer-driven conceptual design method. Okay? That's what I was speaking about today. We need a new concept. What is a concept? How will we start? When they came up with the Ford car 100 years ago, the horn was just a piece of rubber. Then in the last 70 years or so, the horn of a car is about the same. It's electrical. We can see it. This is the system. And nothing changed. All cars, not all, but most of the cars have a horn which looks like that. Suppose we want to design a new one, an innovative one. How can we do that? This is an example that has not been done here. All my other examples will be done here. This is a Scottish example by Professor Pugh. He used some method very similar to ours, or part of it, and asked a group of students to design new horn. And they came out with what we see here. Here we have 12 concepts, which are really ideas. The material here is not defined, nothing is defined, just general ideas, but they are totally different. And if we make a new horn based on one of these concepts, the moment we choose this type of concept only, we have committed more than 75% of the life cycle cost of the product. Only up to 25% we can change later, make good engineering, buy cheap material, etc., etc., etc. 25% have been committed when we started here. And as you see, there is not very much here, but things like that can be done by a teamwork using the new methods. What is affecting the life cycle cost? As we see here, and this is not really to scale, we first have product definition and concept design, which takes usually much less time on this scale. But here, as we say, 75% of life cycle cost has been committed. And performance created till there, but all the failure modes are created later, and sometimes they appear very late, which is very costly. Okay, what is ICDM? I'm not going to speak about all these 10 steps, just about 2 or 3 of them. But this is a general method. We have to identify the customers and their needs, translate it into a product definition, to make abstraction, the definition of the basic problems. This is the hardest step in the whole process, to make abstraction of the product. Then we have the nice and very enjoyable thing to create some of the new elements and to make synthesis of them and to have main concept, etc., etc. Now, for all this, quite a few techniques have been developed. I must be very specific. About half of what we see here, I'm not going to give you all the names because it will take too long. Half what we see here we took from all over the world, like German techniques, Japanese technique, Russian technique. A Russian technique is trees, which is a very powerful thing, but as usual in Israel, we have an Israeli version of trees called SIT, which is a company that makes it much simpler and probably more effective. Well, it really fits to the Israeli temperament, I would say. And we have all these techniques, and about half of them, including the integration, is our study, our work. Okay. First, we will speak a little bit about definition of a new need. Well, I am sorry, but at home it was different. Definition of a new need, this is the most inventive step in the design process. To define a new need or a new problem, you don't have to be a scientist or a professor or anybody. Anybody can do it. The user, from marketing, engineering, their wives, etc., etc. An inventor without any technical education. Person has to be a sensitive person. And if you look around, many writers come up with new needs. One can find it. In Israel, we had even writers long ago who started to develop new products, like Meiri and some others. It has to be a sensitive person who is not satisfied by the state of things. What I mean not satisfied? Just simple example. We walk on a path, and all of a sudden there is a pile of stones there. What we do? We go around, we can go on. One who is sensitive he stops there and asks, well, what's that doing here? We should do something about it. It's wrong that it's here. And I have quite many examples for everyday things that everybody sees at home, which really needs more. Some of the needs that were new needs in the old time, as we say. Fax machine, for instance. A Walkman, safety car seat for a toddler. When I had my children in my car years ago, we never had a safety car to take them around, but now they won't let me to take my grandchildren in a car without a safety car, obviously. Machine for an Israeli salad. You know, the Israeli salad is cut to pieces, and it's not very easy to do an Israeli salad. Oh, I am sorry, but it goes too fast. The machine for an Israeli salad. To build a machine like that you can put in your kitchen and buy it for 250 shekels is sort of mission impossible, sort of. To build such a machine for a company that sells salads, and the machine will be a third of this room size and will cost $2 million, that's okay, that can be done. But to do it a simple one, that's a problem. The last one is the isothermal cup, and I'll speak a little bit about that because that's a very good example. Many years ago, when I was a young postdoc, I spent time in the University of California in Berkeley. And at that time, we had there a visitor. His name was Jack Ryan. Okay? He had more than 1,000 patents on his name. And he gave us a lecture how he works. He was the CTO of Mattel. Mattel makes Barbie and all the toys. And he worked for $1 a year. He gave them permission to use his patents, but he also got 1.5% of the gross sales. So he was very well off. And he told us a story about the isothermal cup. He said, well, I like to drink coffee when I'm working. But for some reason, I didn't enjoy my coffee. Why not? Because when I make it, it's too warm. After about 5 minutes or so, it's in good temperature, and I start drinking it, and it's okay. But then after a few more minutes, it's too cold, so I really enjoy only about a third of my coffee. Now, being an inventor, he defined a new need. He said, well, I want to design a cup that will bring the coffee to my temperature that I like within 10 seconds, and will keep it there for half an hour, so that I can enjoy the coffee. Now, because he was an inventor, he not only came out with a new need, he designed such a cup. Now, it's very simple how he designed it, because you make a cup with double walls, you fill it with a material that changes phase from one phase to another at a certain temperature, and all of a sudden he started to enjoy his coffee. Then he realized that it's so good he can make money out of it, so he produced quite a few of them, put them on the market. People didn't buy it. Why not? It was in the 70s. It costed $25. It was a huge amount of money. Nobody would invest $25. So it wasn't one of his good patents, but the story is as a new need. If we look about current new needs, I'm sorry. A car that makes 100 kilometers per liter fuel is a current new need, and it hasn't been solved. A cellular phone with 2 or more lines, I'm not sure that it's a real need, but it hasn't been done. A catheter that will not let bacteria pass or adhere to. I don't know whether you know, but people who are ill and come to a hospital, the chances that they will die there from an infection that they acquire in the hospital is much, much higher than from the problem they came from home with. And one of the ways how this infection comes in is via a catheter. So there are a lot of ways how to make a catheter that the bacteria will not pass or adhere to, but that hasn't been solved yet. It was improved. One of them is to cover it by antibiotics. The other one is some other things, but it hasn't been proved. Last one, a device or pill to lose weight. I think about 100 companies all around the world have been working on this. Most of them closed. And I'm not talking about bariatric or people who have 50 kilos or more, 50 excess kilogram or more. I'm talking about people who need to shed 10 kilos, 15 kilos, 20 kilos because they want to be healthier, or they have a marriage of their daughter and they want to look fine, etc., etc. So that's a need which hasn't been solved yet, and that's one I know it very well because I have been working on it for some time. Now, is the need a real need? It may only be some deduction of the inventor. It may be, we know that quite a lot of companies did a lot of work, came to the market, and nobody bought their product because the need was not a real need. And the result can be a product. Examples, the isothermal cup. Can somebody tell me why that isothermal cup didn't sell? Actually, it didn't sell because our inventor didn't define a need. He defined a solution. What was his need? His need wasn't to build a cup that does this and that. His need was to enjoy his coffee. And if he would define the need to enjoy his coffee, he would be able to come up with quite a few other solutions. And we all know this small heating thing that you put your coffee on it, and it can be warm the whole day long, and it costs less. So the regular mistake is the bad definition of a need, and we usually define a solution. If we had time here, I would tell you a lot about the chaff rocket launcher from a missile boat. That was a classic example where the army came to Rafael to ask for a rocket launcher, and they didn't need a rocket launcher. They actually needed something else. And we were lucky because they gave us about 15 pages of specification, and we were not able to build it according to their specification. Because if we did, we would have built it, and it would be a total loss. I'm sorry, I think I have the wrong... Oh, okay. It's not the last version of my presentation. I told you that the abstraction is the hardest technique in this process. We always know that safe distance is not kept, and there are a lot of troubles out of it. And we want to develop a device so that we will not hit the car before us. There are companies that are working. What are the functions we need to solve? What are the basic problems? How to measure distance, how to measure velocities, how to activate and some kind of algorithm, how to make some kind of warning, how to activate braking, how to fit the car and the driver. For each one of these basic problems, we can define many theoretical solutions. I say theoretical because some of them don't work, but many good ones work. And it's usually done and best done in a team of people with different backgrounds, because the time that the mechanical engineer invented everything passed 50 years ago. Now everything has to be done by a multidisciplinary team of people who everybody knows something, and then there is a need of somebody who can make the integration of all of them. That's another way to do it. So this is one of the... Another example that my students did, they were trying to make a domestic dog toilet. And that's a real problem because it's needed. That's a means to allow dog to perform. Okay. They wrote down the customers, then they wrote down the customer's needs, step by step. Then they wrote down the basic functions. Till here we got how to do all that. Now the next step is to find solution for the basic functions. And here we come with what is called morphologic table. That's a German technique. And as you see, on each one of the functions, we can write here many solutions. And for instance, measure the dog presence. It can be done by weight, by volume sensor, by image processing, by aura smell, and 10 other techniques. And the numbers that are here are the definitions, what is better and what is worse, and where the risk is higher, and so on. Now, what can we do? Now, because we put the best of our best solutions with lower risk as first, so the next step will be to choose to make combination of concept. This is one concept. We combine this first thing. But sometimes it cannot be combined because it's possible that this one and that one don't work together. So we try another one, and we try another one. Each one of these is a new concept. And we can make, in this case, hundreds of combinations. Not one, not two, not three. And then they came out with some kind of concept, you see. The last technique that I will talk just 1 minute about, the conceptual failure mode analysis. That's an analysis when we have already concepts and to see this is the strongest analysis to make concepts better or to throw them away if they are problematic. Here we have the failure mode and the reason of the failure and the detectability, sorry for the word, and then we make some correction. It's an extremely strong technique. Okay, and then we have a final concept, some conclusion. Innovation can be achieved by a clever combination of known elements and techniques. We don't need to make a breakthrough for everything. By using methods like ICDM in teams. Now, ICDM has been developed in the Technion, partially based on a few earlier techniques, as I said before, German, Russian, Japanese. It is being taught in the Technion in mechanical engineering and system engineering, and there are hundreds of alumni in startup and classical industry. Recently, it's partially taught in other universities and colleges in Israel also. Thank you.
Okay, our final speaker for this session is Amir Gal-Or. Amir, to me, is a pioneer. He pioneered. I think it can be said with confidence. The high-tech industry in Israel, as the director of Mati Ra'anana, he pushed the industry, the high-tech industry, the startups in directions that at the time were unforeseen. Zev Bielski was the mayor, and at some point a company was formed, IBG. I was on the board of IBG, and Bielski wanted to give shares to the citizens of Ra'anana in IBG, but there were some legal implications to that. He's also a pioneer in that he sensed the potential in China, and I think that the VC he registered in China has the illustrious number of registration of 1. I think he registered, is this what you, or maybe you should come and present your experience by first hand. So he lives in Beijing. He opens the door to cooperation with China, and we are very lucky to have him here. So Amir, please.
Good morning, everybody. I think it's a little bit of a different presentation because we are shifting a bit to China. I will speak briefly about Infinity and our background, but the core message is a new concept that we are promoting in China these days. Was originally built up in Israel, and we call it, in Israel we used to call it something like the innovation kibbutz, or kibbutz yazami, a new concept of how to work together on a community level, creating innovation while living in the same place. We've done experiments of that in Kibbutz Kramim about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's much more practical implementing that in China, given the fact that over there, when people want to do something, they just do it rather than deal with the government, because the government is the one doing it. The good things and the bad things that comes with it. Anyway, I'll touch that. It's a brief background about Infinity. I kind of translated from Chinese. We'll see here in the Chinese presentation. That's what I found. We founded in 1993 as a Yozma fund. Yozma was a chain of funds established by the Israeli government. Actually, this is a symbol for very positive government entrepreneurship in the world. Also, China copies a lot of this concept. And what we did here in Israel with Yozma was done with us in China. Very similar in the last few years. We focus on venture capital, US, Israel. And since 2003, we got deep-rooted in China. By now, we have about 15 funds there, more local funds or focus on a specific industry. About 2 billion RMB, and we do parallel investment in US dollars in Israel and in China for about $500 million. We are the first in China market in the sense we're first to establish a fund in China, not for us Israeli, it's global. It's the first foreign fund in China, registered as a fund structure. We created the first IP commercialization concept in China while we try to commercialize IP, which is extremely difficult in China given the IP environment. I mean IPR, intellectual property rights. We have done 10 deals with Chinese investor in Israel, meaning bringing money to Israel, on 10 different deals, significant deals. Some of them were public companies, like Mayan Ventures or Khtashi Magan, and some of them was startup companies. Well, we got the most funds in China as foreign players globally, and we're the first one to get a qualified quota, which means you can convert US dollars to RMB on the fund level rather than on the company level. So it's more financial tools. This is the map of China and the different offices with the Israeli flags and Israeli presidents around China. We have 2 new ones in Nanjing and Xiamen, whoever is familiar with China. The history started in 2003, step by step, by learning through a joint venture concept with Chinese, getting the partnership with the China Development Bank. It's a large fund, and establishing different structures. We're doing more and more agriculture lately. In the last few years, given a strong need in China and large reforms there. We're trying to give a full kind of solution from seed stage to late stage with different tools, all based on basically Israeli technologies. And the idea, we do have a tech collaboration, tech transfer with government support from both governments, mostly naturally the Chinese one. But we always demand Chinese money coming in order to reduce the risk. So we don't do anything without Chinese money. That was a rule we implemented throughout the years. Different tech focuses are here. These are our resources in order to bring value, which is not dependent only on money. So I'm going quite fast. We have 10 minutes. I'm trying to obey rules, and I'll open it later to discussion. The last year, we also work more and more with Chinese companies going out. It's a trend. It's going to increase. By partnering with the Chinese different partners, we reduce their political risk, and we have much more cross-border experience, naturally. So these are different deals that are being structured. Altogether, we have about, say, 40 Chinese companies and about 40 Israeli companies in our portfolios. But we came to talk about this. Basically, this is called the Sino-Israel Innovation Community. It's trying to implement a concept which simply is you work in the community, you live in the community, you're educated in the community, but you also contribute to it. And being contribute, people know this in Israel more in the kibbutz style, where everything was in one place. But the kibbutz was a socialist concept, extremely socialist in the past, less socialist in the recent years. But we took elements from that, and if we jumped already to the next, we took experience from Tefen in Israel, from Matan, which is part of our extended group, and the Israelis kibbutz, and localized this concept also with Chinese characteristic, which is more complicated. Basically, the concept is a way where you have in the same place, you create a community that is based on entrepreneurship. You have the universities and the best schools open branches within the community, and the people who live there have to contribute to the community by certain hours a day, by sharing about 10% of the companies they establish to the community itself, meaning every citizen has ownership, indirect ownership, by just owning a house. He owns also the shares. And the people who live there are screened. They are not just buying a place. You have to go through a screening committee in order to make sure that you have what to contribute to others and you have the right mentality. In this sense, what Genesis is doing is a little bit this is a similar concept, but we are doing it not in terms of also real estate aspect. Basically, we also believe that this creates value on the real estate side, not only on the intellectual property side. So as we said, the resistance are supposed to create an ecosystem in China. We're talking about minimum of 5,000 people, in order to have critical mass. Otherwise, you're dealing with very small settlements, which are not profitable by definition. And you need it to be profitable, otherwise there is no use to the whole thing. The target market, you need in there R&D centers, leading ones. The best thing to have a strong anchor, which is a large company opening their R&D center, and then they have rather smaller R&D centers, either through startup companies or mid-size. An anchor is always the right way to go when you want to work larger scale. The idea for us in this case is to have the top institutions, universities, whether they are foreign institutions or local, and that has to have government support. Government needs to finance that education side and to almost force the best institutions to open their high schools, middle schools in the area while giving after hours entrepreneurial related education. So that's the background was implementing that model. Of course, Silicon Valley aspects exist, which are the best hubs are Israel, Silicon Valley, Boston area. But we are trying to do that according to the location. Bringing economic value, that's the kind of Chinese style slide where you combine the two. Less important, this is the location, the first location we are working on in the city of Nanjing, which is used to be about 4 hours from Shanghai, but given the fast trains in China now, everything is so close there, you don't use airplanes. Basically, it's 1 hour and something from Shanghai and about 3 hours by train from Beijing, which used to be 2 hours flight plus 2 hours waiting. So it's a total different, it's like a suburb of Shanghai and Beijing in a way. So that's the location. Our mission is to bring the soft side, the soft part. The Chinese are extremely good at hardware, building things, and manufacturing things, but lack the soft side of things, which is the openness, the exchange, the creativity, the culture aspects. This takes years and years. That's why it cannot be a short-term project. It has to be long-term, and you have to finance it from real estate profit, basically. So this is more like the planning itself and how to do it given the limitation of the Chinese law. But, every country is different. I do believe that Europe is a great area to focus on such concepts. We do not need to go to such details, but it gives you a little bit of flavor from the different aspects of how the planning is, this is the innovation center itself. Whoever is familiar with building towns knows that a lot of it has to be a BOE, so you build to operate concept. Otherwise, you cannot make it profitable. So the government needs to support you on the BOT. These are the R&D spaces. At least in the planning, it will take years and years to really get this in place. But the vision is there, including working with the Tel Aviv University that is educating lately about 1,000 people from the Nanjing government in Israel. So already I think about 300 were trained, and we're just going to continue that. And this project is naturally with the city leadership. China lacked the culture for openness, culture for creativity, but it's not that the people don't have it inside them, the system just doesn't support it. The education system is extremely limiting, getting out of the line, creativity and collaboration. It's part of the system, but they acknowledge the weakness, and this is a strategic weakness for China government, so they will be spending money in order to change it. Tend to assume that in 20 years it's going to be not only the most entrepreneurial country, which is now, it's going to be also the most creative country. But you need a change of a system. So that's actually part of our value to that. Takes time, but it's better to do it in one location as an experiment with government support rather than try to change the whole society. So just a bit of the planning together with them, culture, community, sharing. It's difficult in China to share, extremely difficult. They think a little bit cultural revolution going back to the 60s. with Chairman Mao when you say too much sharing. So you have to reach the right balance. Since we have incubators in Israel and we're used to this as a very important part of creating the cycle of innovation, you need to have the funding, the incubators, the accelerators, the VC funds. This is something we have in China. We're just going to concentrate it on one place. No, there are benefits to it here and there. But thank you for your time.
The plan is to encourage audience participation in the next 10-15 minutes and ask the speakers to sit in the chairs that are vacant here, if you could join, because that's how the cameraman can see you. So Menachem, if could you please sit here, and Amir? He's doing business now. So any questions, thoughts, comments? Please, yes. There's a mic on your table there.
My first question is, why isn't this place full of 1,000 people from Europe and Israel? That's my first question, because it's so interesting. And wonderful presentations. And I'd like to ask Professor Weiss, where is he?
He's here.
Ah.
Can you introduce yourself so we know?
My name is Mel Rosenberg. I used to be at Tel Aviv University. Udi sprung me, released me. I have a new life. I'm now at the Cholon Institute of Technology, where I teach creative thinking. So my question for Professor Weiss is, thank you very much. It's not working?
For the record, that he's one of Ramot's stars in terms of licensing of IP.
Thank you very much. So my question is, and you spoke so eloquently on the first step. If you think of innovation as a two-step process, the second step is problem solving, and you have all these different techniques which you mentioned for solving problems in ingenious ways. But I agree with what you said, that the real genius is the first step of the process. Now, if anybody can do it and you don't need a university education, is there a way that you can engender people, and you said anybody can do it, and I agree with you, to come up with the first process? The first part of the process, which you said, and I agree, is the really creative step.
Well, first of all, it's sort of different people have different attitudes. And there are people who are open and don't care to speak about everything, and others are closed and they never say anything what they think. There are quite a few ways how to make people come up with innovative things. I will tell only about one of them. When we all were child, we didn't agree to anything. When we were 3 years old, we said, well, always we asked, why? Why is this so and why is that so? And our parents would either answer or not, yes? But the question of why, if we try and do it today on something that bothers us or somebody else, just asking these questions can come and can bring us to a place where we can define a problem that can be translated into a need. And as I said, quite many companies are working for some years, coming up with products, and the products don't sell because they didn't very accurately define the need. And after you say, okay, I need this or that, there is the first technique there called QFD, which was really developed in Japan. it's called quality function deployment, which says nothing, because that was translation from Japanese of 3 words, which each one has 3 meanings. So, but that's a technique that takes a team of people, the one who thought about it, the one who is a developer, the one who is a marketing, etc., and they are trying to take the need and to make a list of a specification, what has to be done. Now, quite many times it happens that when they do that, then they realize that the need is not a real need, and then they stop. But if they realize that the need is a real need, then we get a specification, and the company can start working on it. But I am not sure that, well, the only thing which I can say is, let's not be, not agree with everything. Let us disagree. If you really want, I can give you a personal example. I live in Haifa on the Mount of Carmel, just 20 meters of the water tower. And the water tower is about 10 meters higher than my apartment, which means that I don't have water pressure. And I've been living there for many, many years. So we started to write letters to the Haifa municipality and ask them to make something about the water pressure. And we did so for about 15 years. And they said, well, we'll do this, we'll do that. Nothing helped. Then one day I said, well, we have to do something about it ourselves. And it's extremely easy. We made a drawing, a technical drawing of a pump and some switches, etc. And it cost about 1,000 shekels for the whole building, not apartment. And then we asked an installer and a plumber to come over and to do that for us. And it didn't like very much. But then there was set a meeting for a Monday to start with the project. And on Sunday, suddenly, there was water pressure unlimited. We asked why, because at that time, Mitzna, who was the mayor, came to live near our house, so everything was fixed. That's a true story. But I give it as an example that I am teaching things like that, and it took me about 15 years to do something about it.
Yes, please.
My name is Tzvi Meiri. I have had most of my career working with Menachem in Rafael. I'm teaching systems engineering at Technion, and I have some disagreement with Menachem. He forgot to mention one of the most important things in all the methodology. This is what you have between your ears. You can use any methodology that you want, and it's perfect. You use all the tools. And I am arguing with the students and with Menachem's colleague that has developed a system with him, because they think that if they do it this way, they'll get the perfect product. What I tell them is use all the tools that you have, but check them, use them as a checklist. The most important thing is your common sense. If the results that you get from this methodology does not agree with your common sense, test all the data that you gave to the methodology. And one of the problems is, again, that people sometimes tend to get carried away with such a nice methodology and forget the real thing. Now, some other remarks. Let me tell a little joke. 2 jokes. One about innovation. The first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, was a chemist. And he used to tell the story that when he worked as a professor in Britain during the First World War, where he invented a process for making acetone, synthetic acetone, he asked one of his assistants, how do you like your job? She said, oh, it's great. Every day a new discovery. He said, easy, easy. If you discover something in the morning, in the afternoon you discover that it's not true, do you count as? 0 discoveries or 2 discoveries? And another thing about the car that goes 100 miles per gallon, when Obama set on trying to help Detroit out of the crisis a few years ago, his team of young people came there and they talked to the head of research of the Car Industry Association. Said, oh, you are not doing a good job. You should have a car that goes 100 miles per gallon, that can go, for so and so many miles without refueling and so on. And this person was a veteran of the industry, said, well, I'm sorry, but what you ask contradicts the laws of physics. They said, don't worry, Obama can get any law change as his will. He has the power. And talking a little about needs. You were talking about real need. And real need includes something which you didn't mention, if you're talking commercially. It's the perceived need. The need does not have to be real. It should be perceived as a need by the market. But if the perceived need is not real, it's not stable. It may change one day like this. And this is another thing that you have to look into. And these are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One final contribution. Well, the book of Chaim Weizmann, Trial and Error, is actually a very good textbook for what Professor Miri was talking about. And I don't think it's in print anymore, but if anyone has ever read it, he probably kept the copy.
and may I add,
yes,
something that is not always realized, because Chaim Weizmann, of course, was a chemist, but the process to produce acetone was by biotechnology, without really knowing the term biotechnology. By using bacterial fermentation, he was able to invent a new field, and actually is one of the great pioneers of biotechnology. Without being before this field was even the term was even invented.
Okay, we have coffee now, right?
אני רק רוצה one
We have
small
an
remark.
announcement and coffee.
Not announcement, I have a comment. I've been sitting here all days. I want to show you that I learned something yesterday. Yankee Margalit was here, and he said, if you have any problem, you just go to Facebook, pose your need, if you have problems with the water or whatever, and then you have a process of do it yourself via Facebook. You'll get many people calling you with all kinds of ideas, and he showed about 10 products or whatever, everything done via Facebook. So there are other ways, the ways of the new era or whatever.
Yes, please.
Just one comment about what we said. First of all, we worked together, and I agree to almost everything that he said. But there is some small clarification. In Rafael, we worked for many years and did a lot of interesting things, and you hear now about our pupils, I would say, what they are doing now. Now, there were excellent people, but among the excellent people, there were very, very few that were really special, innovative, very few, like, 1 or 2 per 100 or less. Tzvi was one of them. Now, for such people, you don't need any techniques. They know for themselves how to work, and the techniques don't fit them. But to, I would say, regular people, if they don't have the technique, they just don't do anything. And that is the difference. Thank you.
So I think we had a demonstration of openness and sharing and controversy, as Amir was trying to educate the Chinese to do. I don't know if it works like that in China. Anyhow, we have 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We have a break, okay, for coffee now. Thank you.